She was in the first wave of women to work offshore for Shell as an engineer, and she worked her way up to management, eventually becoming in charge of all of Shell's offshore Gulf operations. After some time as a stay-at-home mom in Slidell, she ran for state senate against an incumbent and currently serves as Senate Majority Leader. Born in Lake Charles and currently living in Slidell, this year she decided to run for governor. Today on the Louisianist, Senator Sharon Hewitt. Hello, bonjour. We are here at the St. Landry Parish Visitor Center in Opelousas, back for our podcast, The Louisianist. And today we have the privilege of talking with a candidate for governor, Senator Sharon Hewitt. Hello.
Hi, Will.
How's it going?
Really good, thanks.
Thank you so much for making the time to do this interview.
I'm happy to be here.
Us too. And so to start, we always like to ask people to talk a little bit about their upbringing. And so I think you were born in Lake Charles, so can you tell us about growing up in Louisiana?
Yeah, born and raised in Louisiana, grew up in Lake Charles. I think I was the first graduating class from Barb High School that went there all 4 years. So many people know Barb High School. And then went to LSU to study mechanical engineering, where I graduated. And then went to work for Shell in the offshore deepwater Gulf of Mexico business. I started out my first year on a drilling rig, back in the 80s, which was a pretty rough and tumble place, no matter who you are, but especially for women. They weren't used to seeing women offshore. And then left after a 20-year career, basically managing Shell's central deepwater Gulf of Mexico business, and had billions of dollars in assets, hundreds of employees, and came home to be a full-time mom and work with our kids. They were in first and third grade at the time. And once they grew up and got married and went to school, went to college and graduated, I began thinking about, what's next for me. Now that I'm all grown up, what do I want to do with the rest of my life? And really just felt that the state was heading in the wrong direction. Mm-hmm. And that if good people didn't run, that we were never going to fix the problems in our state. And engineers are pretty good problem solvers, and I thought our state had an infinite number of problems that needed to be solved. Nobody in my family had ever been in politics before. It was never anything I thought about, but decided to run for the state senate and beat an incumbent by 19 percentage points, which is a pretty big whooping,
Right.
And I've been in the Senate now for 2 terms. I'm finishing up my 8th year. I currently work as the Senate Majority Leader, which is an elected position by my fellow Republicans in the Senate. And I chair the Senate and Governmental Affairs Committee that has, oversight over ethics and boards and commissions and lots of other kind of important issues. And, still feel like the things that I campaigned on 8 years ago and things that I have legislated on, I've passed over 125 bills. It's like a record-setting number of bills. And they have almost all been in the area of, education, workforce, crime, the economy, smaller government, all of those kind of conservative principles that I campaigned on, that I've legislated on, I think are still things that we are lacking leadership on. And so that's basically why I'm running for governor,
Right.
is to tackle those things and to lead in a way that will make people want to stay in Louisiana rather than giving people a reason to leave Louisiana.
Right. And I think it's interesting as an engineer, it seems like somewhat of a unique or different background as a politician. And so did you have engineers in your family, or what made you decide to study engineering at LSU?
My dad was an engineer in the oil business. My mom was a school teacher. And so I spent most of my life thinking I was going to be a school teacher. I was good in math and science. My mom was a math and science teacher. And at some point, I think I realized that my dad made more money than my mom did. And so I decided to switch and to become an engineer. And I'm really glad that I did. Engineers, again, are good problem solvers. You take a problem and you look at what are all the possible solutions, who are the people that can help me, how do you build a team, and then let's go solve the problem. And I think that kind of thought process, that collaborative thought process, is really important in government. And as a leader of a major division at Shell, I sharpened my leadership skills. I was there in the mid-'80s when oil was $12 a barrel. And, we were struggling to survive for the first time in the history of the company. And so we got really crystal clear on how to streamline our processes and to focus on the things that really made a difference. And I think state government is exactly the same way. We have gotten kind of bureaucratic and slow and unresponsive in many cases to the needs of our citizens. And I think it's time for kind of a gut check and a course correction. And let's look at what are the things that are really important and focus on those. And let's get rid of all the other nonsense that kind of slows us down, costs a lot of extra taxpayer dollars, and is frustrating, to our citizens, because at the end of the day, they're expecting us to deliver results. And we know that on any scorecard, Louisiana is not where we want to be. And so, I bring that kind of thinking to the governor's office that I think is unique to any other candidate.
And where were you living? When did you move to, because you live in Slidell now, or?
Yes, yeah. When I graduated from LSU, I basically worked and lived in the New Orleans area.
When you were working at Shell?
Yeah, working
Okay.
at Shell. So lived in Metairie for the first year, was working at One Shell Square on
Okay,
Pointer
okay.
Street. And then at some point, and it wasn't very long after that, Stan and I got married and we moved to Slidell.
Okay.
Because we just thought that was going to be a great place to raise a family. And it was. We have 2 sons. They were born and raised in Slidell. And now one is in New York City, one is in Seattle. You could not be further from Slidell, honestly. And we just completed a big circle, as a matter of fact, to go visit our kids. But they left because there weren't opportunities for them here in Louisiana.
Right.
And that's the problem. I'm living a living example of that. And there are families all around the state that have that same experience, where their kids and their grandkids have moved away because we're not offering the right opportunities for them here.
And speaking of that, so your professional career at Shell, can you talk to us a little bit about what that was like, especially the aspect of especially offshore? It's, I think, a male-dominated area, but what was that experience like? Did it toughen you up? Did it make you figure out how to do coalition building with people that might be different?
Oh, it was a rough and tumble place for sure. I mean, I was, for all practical purposes, the first female offshore that the guys had ever seen. I think I was the first female, or the only female, in my mechanical engineering class at LSU. So it's not like the idea of being the only female was foreign to me. But you're offshore working 7 days on and 7 days off. I was 1 year on a drilling rig. And I remember when I went out on my very first hitch, we call it, and shook hands with the rig foreman. And there's several hundred people that work offshore at one time on this one platform. And I shook hands with the rig foreman, and he said, "There's 2 problems with the oil business." And I'm thinking, I'm going to get this great nugget of information on my first day.
Right.
And he said, "There's 2 problems. The first is O-rings. Those are, the black elastomers that keep your garden hose from leaking. It's a big problem in the drilling business. And the second problem is women." And I'm like, okay, I've never been compared to an O-ring before. This is going to be a great career. And it was. But, that was sort of the beginning of the message that, we don't want women out here. Women don't belong in the oil business. And so I had to earn my stripes. I had to prove that I was competent, I was capable, I was a team player, I was going to contribute. And, as soon as I kind of bailed the foreman out and didn't rat him out to the office, then we were best friends for life. And, fast forward, when I left the company, I was managing, billions of dollars in assets, hundreds of employees. And those guys that gave me kind of a hard time at the beginning of my career actually worked for me at the end of my career.
Right.
And several of them I've kept in touch with,
Right.
over the years. And so I do think that has kind of prepared me for the world of politics. It is a very male-dominated field. It can be kind of tough sometimes, right? And it is totally different than my work experience in terms of, how you get things done, because there's not just one person in charge. In a legislative process, there are 144 people that all have a vote and all have a different idea on what we should accomplish. In the business world, it's much easier because you have kind of a hierarchy and there's clear decision-making authority. In the legislature, it has to be much more collaborative. So I bring both of those experiences then to the governor's office, where, what I think we have been lacking is a governor that can establish a vision and work collaboratively with the legislature and say, okay, let's agree on the things that we can accomplish together and how we're going to do that, and let's work together to get it done. And although we did pretty well, given that we have, Republican legislature and a Democrat governor, there were certainly a lot of things that we worked together on. But imagine if you had, more collaboration, how much more effective we could be. And, the citizens demand it. I mean, everybody that writes my office, that seldom do they say, go do X or go do Y. They say, y'all just go do something, right? Let's fix the state. Let's move our state forward. And they're getting tired and frustrated with all the partisan politics, right? So I think that I have established a reputation for working across the lines. It doesn't really matter to me, party affiliation. What we need to focus on is the issue at hand and the best way to address it and do what's right for our citizens. Look, I don't know if my neighbors are Republicans or Democrats, but I know they care about a better education for their kids and good jobs and an economy, an affordable cost of living. They want safe neighborhoods. They all want that. And it's not just a Republican theme or a Democrat theme. So those are the things that we need to do, and we can do that together.
Right. And before we talk a little bit more about some of those issues that you think there's a consensus on the state and that you would focus on, I'm just curious on the lifestyle point of offshore. So I have friends that have worked offshore, but at the same time, I'm from New Orleans. I think a lot of people don't know what it's like. So can you talk a little bit of like how that works in terms of how it would work? So you would be back home and then you go down, where would you go? And then do you take a helicopter out to the platform?
Sure.
And how does it all work? Yeah.
Sure, no, so it is very different, you're right. I mean, so most of the time you would fly offshore, and depending on how far out, it could be a 1-hour flight, lots of people on the helicopter, and usually you'll land on one platform, and it's kind of scary. You're landing on a helipad that's over here kind of off to the side, and there's no there's no railings or anything because it's not safe. So it's just a flat, out in the middle of nowhere, 200 feet up in the air in the Gulf of Mexico. These platforms are like the size of a football field, 8 or 9 decks of grating, and you look down at your boots and you see the Gulf of Mexico. So it's very disorienting. The helicopter blades are spinning. You feel like you're getting blown all over the place. There's a set of steps. No handrails, again, because the handrails would be an obstruction to the helicopter. And, again, there's several hundred people that live and work there. I was in a room with 5 other guys, triple bunk beds. and really, there were 6 other guys that were there, but that also shared that same room because you have half the people working, let's say 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., and the other half in the night shift. And you're double bunked up in the rooms, and so they change the sheets twice a day. So there's 6 different guys in the room that you're sleeping in 12 hours later, and there were no private quarters or anything. The bathroom, there was no private bathroom, so it's just a men's locker room at the end of the hall. And every day I would go in and try to work up my nerve to take a shower, and no doors lock offshore either because. In an emergency, you want to evacuate, get everybody out and evacuate, right? So because half the crew is sleeping all the time. And so nothing locks. And so this men's locker room had, one door that went right out to the rig floor, and one door would go back into the quarters, the office space. And nothing locks. And so every day I'd walk in trying to work at my nerve to take off my red coveralls and, take a shower. And every day I'd say, nope, not today. So I did that for 7 days and then went home. So you're home for 7 days and then you work for 7 days. And so I went home for 7 days and I thought, okay, I have to do this for a whole year. It's a 1-year kind of training assignment. I've got to figure this out. And so I went back offshore with a 40-foot piece of rope. And you know what I did with the rope?
No.
So I went into the middle of the room, Will, and I tied the two doorknobs together. And just because engineers always have a backup plan, I would
Right.
shower in my bathing suit.
Oh, I love that.
And that is a true story. Every time I went offshore, I would have a one-piece bathing suit and a 40-foot piece of rope, because you never knew, what the situation was going to be like. And that first year, I actually worked on 14 different drilling rigs. And so the setup was always a little bit different, but never did I have my own room, So the guys made it tough on you. Not all of them, but many of them. And, like I said, I never complained. I never thought of it as a story. I mean, I tell the story a lot now on the campaign trail because I realize that people that haven't worked offshore are fascinated by that.
Definitely, right.
And find that to be kind of interesting. And, again, there's no quit in me. I mean, I guess I got that from my parents as a kid. I wasn't about to quit, because maybe there were some tough days, on an offshore drilling rig. There's certainly tough days in politics, and I'm not going to quit. I'm in it to win it. I'm in it for the long haul, and believe that that's the kind of leader that we need in our state.
Right. And I guess those kind of formative experiences helped you develop the grit to work your way to the top, so to speak, or work your way up in the food chain. And so when you were more in the management role at Shell, how many platforms were there at the time? I think you had mentioned earlier, or approximately, yeah.
There were tons. I mean,
Yeah.
we were the leader in the deep water exploration business, Shell was. And so, we were building new platforms all the time. And, that I had what they called the Mexican buffet was actually kind of my core area. So we nicknamed platforms, after Mexican food in this particular area. We had enchilada and salsa and chimichanga, and those were kind of the names of some of the key developments at that time. But it was just a great experience. I, had many different assignments during my time at Shell where I was negotiating big joint venture deals with, the leaders at Exxon or Texaco or Chevron or all the major oil companies. I had an assignment where I was responsible for Shell Oil Company's domestic budget. And so I was doing all the economics related to all the different proposals on things that we could drill or prospects that we could partner with other people. And so I was evaluating return on investment and profitability and cash flow and all of those things, and pitching that to the worldwide leaders because we were competing with other projects around the world. And so, look, I learned some of my fiscal responsibilities and those things that now, again, I carry into the legislature from that corporate environment, and learning, again, how to be really crystal clear on what moves the needle and the things that mattered the most to the company, which was, of course, profitability and safety and being environmentally responsible. And so, again, I don't think any other candidate has that kind of experience that they bring to the table. So, again, I never thought I was going to run for governor. I never thought I was going to be in politics. Sometimes it's just God's plan and,
Right.
and the decisions and the opportunities that you've had along the way.
Right, rolling with the punches. And so both business and politics, one thing they have in common is it's a lot of people, dealing with people and kind of navigating, like you were saying, in these joint ventures, et cetera. And so I wanted to ask, how have you approached, you said that you've passed, I think you said 125 bills, which seems like a lot, especially because I feel like so many bills don't get passed, they just die.
It's hard,
I've
yeah.
noticed. And so how do you approach coalition building, or how have you approached coalition building in the legislature?
Well, you do have to think about what's important to the other person, right? So, sometimes they like to say, the best way for me to get something done is to help you figure out a way to get something that's important to you done, and how we can work together. And I think people appreciate that. It is a people business, and so relationships are very important. So getting to know people on a personal level, where it's not just always kind of work related, but the social aspect of it. I've traveled the state ever since being elected, and been in everybody's district because that's really important to me. That because decisions that I make don't just affect my district in the St. Tammany and Plaquemine and St. Bernard and New Orleans area, but it affects everybody here in St. Landry and St. Martin and Evangeline parishes and North Louisiana. And so, it is not that difficult. It is harder, again, and I said this earlier, than business because there's not just one decision maker. And so, what I think it does take, again, is going back to a vision for the state and setting some goals and working towards that. And to me, that's kind of what we have been lacking. And I have great relationships with the legislature. I helped many of them get elected in this last cycle. And we have a tremendous group of people. They come from all different professional backgrounds, and so everyone kind of contributes, in their area of interest or where perhaps they have, the expertise. And so we learn to depend on each other for advice in those areas where perhaps something that's not my strength could be the strength of another legislator, and vice versa. So they certainly look to me for leadership on energy issues. That's something I've been very passionate about. I've done a lot of work in the area of education and STEM and, encouraging more women to get involved in politics and things like that.
Great. And so speaking a little bit about how that experience makes you influence what your vision is for the state, I think that's compelling to a lot of people about how, the stakes are very high, and so we need bold leadership, and like you were saying, and so what do you view your vision for the next 5 years or 10 years or whatever time horizon for the state?
Mm-hmm. Well, I like to think about what do everyday people want in Louisiana? What's the everyday voter, the everyday family talking about around the kitchen table? It's very basic things. It is, they want their kids to get a good education. They want their kids to have a good job. They want it to be affordable, an affordable cost of living and a good economy where we're growing and money's coming into the state. They want to be safe in their neighborhoods. And I think in general, people want less government and more personal freedom. And so how do you accomplish those things? And I've legislated in all of those areas. I mean, those are the same things I campaigned on when I was running for the Senate. Mm-hmm. Those things are very important to everyday people. And I think a lot of what I have done has moved the needle forward. But we do have to have bold leadership. And look, I'll just talk about education as an example. I've worked on literacy. I'm working on math now. I've been working on STEM. I've worked on a lot of workforce related, pathways for high school students to go right into the workforce with an industry-based certification. So there's multiple pathways to success. I think we have to really look at how we deliver education, because the curriculum is very much the same today as it was 30 years ago or 40 years ago when I was in high school, right? So how do we make the high school and the community technical college system and the university programs more flexible, more adaptable to the needs of the quickly, fast-paced, changing demands of the job market? I mean, we can't just keep teaching the same curriculum when our employers are looking for different things. I mean, look how much technology has changed just in the last 5 years. Imagine how different it's going to be 5 years from now. But how are we preparing our students for that? We're not doing anything bold in terms of our high schools or our university programs. And so I think we have to really totally rethink how we deliver education and how we prepare our people for the workforce. Because at the end of the day, we do need for people to go to work. We have the lowest workforce participation rate in the country in Louisiana. We have about 2 million jobs, 185,000 of them are open right now. Well, so why is that? Is that because people don't want to work, or because they don't have the right skills for the jobs that are open? Those are the kinds of things we need to evaluate, and to be able to be nimble enough to move quickly, which government has never, you would never say government and quickly in the same breath, right? But Shell never moved quickly either until our back was against the wall and we had $12 a barrel oil, right? So we have to feel like our back is against the wall and challenge the status quo, challenge the sacred cows, and move quickly, because we're at a crossroads. More people are leaving Louisiana right now than are moving here. And you have to stop that. And you're not going to stop it by putting up barricades on I-10 and I-49, right? You have to do it because you have to give people a reason to want to be here. And I think that we can do that.
Right, definitely. And part of that, of course, is job creation too. In addition to the workforce training, there's the job creation piece and also the higher paying job piece, like you were talking about in the case of your sons. That I think so many people in my generation too, we have too many friends who've left the state because they didn't find what they thought were good paying jobs or the jobs that they were most interested in. And so what is your thoughts on the economic diversification strategy? Where are there jobs that could be created in Louisiana that are not being created right now?
Mm-hmm. Well, we have to work backwards to start with the industries that we have in our state and the job skills that they need. Mm-hmm. I'll give you a great example. The Michoud assembly facility is in my district. We're building the SLS rocket. Boeing is a big contractor on that project. The project manager for Boeing told me the other day that she's got 200 job openings working for Boeing. Those are high wage, high demand jobs, and she can't find anybody to hire without feeling like she has to go to Huntsville, Alabama to hire people. Okay, well, that's on us, right? We should be talking to those kinds of employers, whether we're talking about aerospace or maritime, or LNG, or cybersecurity, or agriculture. Those are all healthcare. Those are all major industries in our state. Right. And we know what their workforce demands are. I mean, we do some forecasting. We probably aren't doing as good a job of it as we should. And then building the pipeline of students to fill those jobs, right? I mean, you can't, again, just keep delivering the same kind of education and the jobs are over here, and it's just a big disconnect. So we have to connect the dots. And then to your point earlier, we have to make sure that the industries, we need to be forward thinking in the industries that we want to attract, and then build the skill set to attract that industry. Because what's the first question industries ask, when they're evaluating, do we want to move to Louisiana or move to these other, 4 states? They want to know if you have the workforce that they need before they make a decision. That's the first question they ask, site selectors. And so we want to be forward thinking so that we can say, yes, we have the trained workforce that you're going to need. Please come locate here in our state. And so that's how you grow the economy. That's the engine to grow our economy. It starts with education, but you have to be very deliberate about the type of education so that you're pointing people directly into the jobs right here in our state.
Right, and within that, kind of what you're talking about of starting with what we're already good at and what we have a advantage in already, of course, the first thing that comes to mind is the energy industry. And so what do you view as the role of the energy industry going forward in Louisiana? Obviously, it's a key part, but there's been much discourse about, if you look at the jobs that used to be in oil and gas and the production output in the 70s to now, it's dropped off, and there's a variety of causes for that, but will we be able to get that back up again? And to what extent do you think we'll be able to create more jobs in energy specifically in Louisiana?
Well, the worldwide forecast is that we're going to need 50% of our energy will be provided, 40% will be provided by traditional oil and gas in the year 2040. I said that wrong. 40% in the year 2050.
Okay.
Okay. So it is going to be traditional oil and gas providing the energy that we need. And it's because the population, of course, is going to continue to increase, and some of the renewables are not growing as fast, right? So fossil fuels is going to be here for a very long time, and they provide not just the energy that we need for power, but also the clothes and the plastics and all of the things that are so part of our lifestyle. It all comes from fossil fuels. Now, in Louisiana, we're smart enough to know that we also have to diversify our portfolio, right? So I have been a big proponent of hydrogen, for example, and have provided some state funding to many of our academic institutions to study how do you use hydrogen as a fuel. And there's a lot of developing technologies to do that. Wind and solar are also great options for our state. Offshore Lake Charles area, south of Lake Charles, has been established by the federal government as a very great source of wind, and so we're gearing up for that. So the state's role, I think, is to say, we want to provide the broad guardrails for those kinds of industries and give them an opportunity to choose Louisiana as a place where they want to do business. And so I think we can do it all, and coupled with being still environmentally responsible. So we want to limit our greenhouse gas emissions. Every company that's moving to Louisiana wants to do that. Their customers want it. Their stakeholders, their shareholders want that. So we'll capture the emissions, the greenhouse gas emissions, condense them, pipe them, and inject them underground, carbon capture and storage. And so that's just being environmentally responsible. And Louisiana, quite honestly, is the #1 choice in the world for doing that, because we have the right geology and we've got a great infrastructure in terms of pipeline and a lot of manufacturing facilities that are generating carbon that want to be more environmentally responsible.
Definitely. And so on this environmental point, that's one of the last questions I wanted to ask you is often the energy development and the environment are sometimes cast as opposites, or they're in contention. But of course, we know that most of our environmental protection funds come, in fact, from the energy industry. I understand that the BP oil spill money is going to be running out soon. And so what do you view as the strategy for getting more revenue for the very important coastal protection projects we have?
Yeah, the BP oil spill money, I think, does run out in 2031.
Okay.
There's, yes, you're right. Most of the coastal restoration dollars come from oil and gas revenues. So right now we send a portion of our offshore oil and gas revenues to the government, the federal government, and they give some back. We call it Go Mesa.
Right.
And there are proposals that our congressional delegation have made where Louisiana's cut of that would be higher. Right now it's 37.5%. They're asking for 50, which, by the way, is what the states get on federal land, on dry land. They get 50%. So why are we only getting 37.5 for offshore? So I think they have a great argument. Of course, you have to convince all of those congressmen that don't have any offshore property in their state, that is fair, and so that's always been the challenge. There's also proposals to consider similar revenue streams for wind, for example. So when the wind industry is generating revenue, part of that perhaps goes to the federal government and would come back to the state, and we would dedicate that for coastal restoration. So I think there's some opportunities for some additional new revenue streams that we don't currently have, so we can continue the coastal restoration work that's so important, to basically everybody south of I-10.
Definitely, and I think the 37.5% versus 50% issue is one of the most underappreciated issues, both in Louisiana and nationally, because everyone knows that we basically fuel the nation, or at least we're, if you include offshore, one of the largest energy producing states within the country. And so I don't know, when I discovered that recently with the whole Breaux Act conversation, et cetera, it's pretty shocking that we're actually receiving less percentage-wise revenue than many onshore producing states that produce much less, and all of that. And so my last question for you is the cultural component. And, for us, we view the culture and the French language as an important asset to it in a way, in terms of attracting people, because it adds to the quality of life. We have festivals here that they don't have elsewhere. We have the potential for a bilingual workforce. It could help attract French businesses. And so what do you think makes Louisiana so special, and why is that also an important part of our future?
Well, it's exactly what you say. I mean, people love Louisiana. It's a very popular tourist attraction. Certainly the movie industry is very big here. I mean, they love our food, our culture, our architecture, our uniqueness. We are very unique, and people love that about our state. It's a reason why many people who grow up in Louisiana choose to stay here, right? Because they have fallen in love with all of those things like that you say that make us so special. But at the end of the day, sometimes families have to make choices, right? Because you have to provide for your family, you have to have a job, you have to do things to make sure your kids are getting a good education. And so sometimes people are faced with the hard choices of having to leave. And so, we can change that. And again, all the reasons why people love Louisiana, we just have to give them a few other reasons to stay. And I think that we can do that.
Right. That's what I always say is that the culture, you can't just create that from nothing. And so we have, whereas the other problems, we can actually deal with them if we have the political will for it. So I don't know, I'm optimistic. And the last question, so what's next for you in the campaign? What is your plan to win the election?
Well, we're going to be burning up the roads now that the legislative session is over, and so that's exciting. Of course, we're raising money, and so we're going to be in your mailbox, and we're going to be on your TV, and you're going to start seeing a lot about Sharon Hewitt and giving me an opportunity to introduce myself to voters. I find that people around the state are ready for a change, and they love my story. I think I have a great background that makes me a good candidate, and I'm passionate about our state. I'm born and raised here, and I want this to be a state that hopefully my kids and grandkids will move back to one day. And so that motivates me greatly. So it's going to be a tough campaign. Every campaign is, but this is a tough lady, and I think I'm up to the task, and I look forward to shaking as many hands as possible and introducing myself to all the voters.
Sounds good. Well, we'll definitely stay tuned, and thank you so much again for making the time for the interview.
It's my pleasure. And look, if you want more information, you can go to SharonHewitt.com. There's a lot of information there about my policy, my accomplishments in the legislature, a few family pictures, and there might even be a picture of me in my red coveralls on that drilling rig that I was telling you about.
To give you a visual, no, I love that. Cool.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, and yeah, c'est bon. See you all next time.
Thank you.